How many of you had a New Year's resolution? Okay, I'm sure some of you are raising your hands. How many of you have kept your New Year's resolution? Probably not the same hands are raised. What can be some of those challenges when it comes to having a willingness and a commitment, at least short term, to change a habit? And then what happens, right? We have our best intention on changing that habit, being committed to it. However, there can be temptation, there can be distractions that prevent us from keeping our New Year's resolution or maintaining that habit long term. In this snapshot, we're going to be talking about 4 key steps that you want to develop as a habit to ensure that you are successful in the classroom and to ensure that you are successful on the CNE exam. If you haven't been with us before, welcome. We're glad that you're here. And if you're returning, welcome back. We want to make sure that you are following consistent practices when you show up for our snapshot. That first habit is printing out the study worksheet. Okay. And then the second habit is having your resources. We use Billings and Halstead Teaching and Nursing is the 6th edition. And then you're going to also use Dr. Caputi's CNE Review Book, the 2nd edition. These are the only 2 textbooks that you need to ensure that you are reviewing the content that will help you be successful on the exam. And then the other resource you want in front of you is the Candidate Handbook. You can find that at nln.org, specific for the exam you're taking. And what you want to look at is that detailed test blueprint. The content that we're covering is primarily aligned with competency 1 and 2, which is about 50% of the exam review or the exam questions. Okay, that's for CNE. And then for CNE novice, it's the same, about 50% or so. And then for CNE clinical, there are key elements that are embedded throughout every competency related to the importance of our role to facilitate learning, to really coach students through the learning process. We know it's not enough just to teach. We've got to validate that learning has happened. We've got to validate that students are competent to provide safe patient care. All right, so back to our habits. First, I want you to think about the last habit that you had a goal of developing and what got in the way. What were those distractions that prevented you from reaching your goal? All right, and before we get too deep into our content, let's take a look at our thought provoking question. So, we have this question about the Nurse Educator. So, they are making revisions to the curriculum to align with pedagogical teaching strategies. Now, based on student feedback, there will be several changes to the course next semester. The question is asking which statement would be most concerning about the plan. We have a group project will be added as an assignment to better engage in the learning process. B, flipped classroom will be integrated to reinforce comprehension of clinical concepts. Or C, storytelling will be removed since it is a passive learning experience with low impact. All right, so what you want to think about first and foremost is what is the question asking me? And second of all, what is it that I know for sure related to concepts within this question? All right, so you want to take time to look at the STEM, and then you want to think about what those options are and what would be the best answer based on the information I am given. So, what's your plan? You want to be clear every single week about what specific learning objectives you are achieving. And if there's additional information you need to learn about related to those concepts aligning with that specific objective. So, how do you stay current with trends, policies, and practices? We know that healthcare is constantly changing. Step 1 is being an active member of a professional organization. GAIN is an example. We're attending their conference. That's the Georgia Association for Nursing Education. But staying involved, actively involved with a professional organization that is aligned with following those evidence-based practices outlined by NLN is going to help you establish a sense of community. We know how important community is when we think about challenges that we have along the way. We always are reaching out to our peers to say, have you had this experience before? And what action did you take to ensure that this was resolved, whatever the situation is? There's a lot of great Facebook groups that do the same thing. So just think about the benefit of having a professional organization, and that's going to help you stay on track with some of those current updates that are happening with our evidence-based practices that may prompt us to change our policies. Okay, so again, thinking about the value of a professional organization, is this about establishing community or networking, but also giving us those evidence-based practice updates related to the literature. Next is also aligned with exactly that, thinking about the self-directed learning that we need to embrace as an adult learner. And also, it's considered unstructured learning because I'm thinking about what is it that I don't know and what steps I need to take to ensure I am closing my knowledge gaps. All right, the second habit is integration into practice. This is aligned with Cobb's experiential learning theory, chapter 14, and Billings and Halstead, table 14.1, list out some of those key theories that you want to make sure you're knowledgeable about. We know it's not enough just to understand the what, such as the teaching strategies we're using in the classroom, but we want to understand the why. What's the rationale for teaching using group projects and facilitation of learning using flipped classroom, right? So we want to better understand how it aligns with the evidence, specifically the learning theory, and how is it going to support the teaching process? Because remember, it's not enough just to teach, but we also want to make sure learning happens. So engaging in group projects is an example, those unfolding case studies. That's how we begin the process of integration of theory into learning. Okay, and experiential learning is also known as David Cobb's, or it's aligned with David Cobb's framework, where he talks about we start entering into the learning process by first having that direct experience. Okay, so that's the first step. Even though we know we may enter and exit at different points in that learning cycle, that step one in Cobb's experiential learning theory really is having the actual practice experience. So we want to become a scholar. We want to be able to teach that allows learning to happen, right? That is our goal. We are teaching to learn. That is the sole purpose of us developing these evidence-based teaching strategies. We want to be committed to lifelong learning. And what does that look like? Well, let's go back. Well, it looks like, first of all, us understanding the value. Okay, if I can get here we go. All right, very good. So we want to understand the value of pedagogy, right? Well, we have the content expert that is facilitating the learner's knowledge. We know that in the higher ed environment, there is value in pedagogy and andragogy, which is all about the adult learning. We want to facilitate the learning process so that our learners will eventually be able to engage in that self-directed unstructured learning that we talked about earlier. And this allows them to be active participants in the learning process, right? They become, as they transition into the andragogy components of learning, our learners are able to really embrace the learning experience for themselves. We know that our students learn from so many different sources, right? With the pedagogy model, the learning comes from the content experts, but we know that our students can't stay there, right? It has to be a collaborative experience. We are partners with our students on the journey of learning. All right, so that's one key element that we want to think about as we consider the importance of lifelong learning, being that scholar. Okay, so that's habit number 3. And now we want to take a look at habit number 4, last but not least, is beginning with the end in mind. So thinking about what is important. Do we have a passion for learning? What are some of those frustrations that we have when we think about how our students learn and how do we best connect with them? Okay, so what frustrates us? Understanding that by beginning with the end in mind, which is really about students being able to achieve the program outcomes, it really does cause us to think about what's most important in the learning process. As students are transitioning from one course to another, as they are progressing in our nursing program, what's most important? Well, first and foremost is learning. We create that learning environment for our students. And then we want to think about competency. Have we validated competency? When we're doing our formative evaluations throughout the learning experience, what are those red flags that we're seeing with certain students? How are we helping students move past and get through some of those struggles that they may be experiencing related to their ability to learn? And then nursing excellence. This is ultimately what we want our students to be able to embrace as they transition into practice, is that they understand what these minimum practice expectations are. being able to identify what it is that they don't know, right? Doing that self assessment, just like you all are doing on this journey, to identify what are my gaps in practice? How do I best prepare to provide safe patient care? What are my resources that I need? Am I advocating for myself as a student to say, you know what? I know that I've placed an IV in nursing school, but that was a long time ago and I only did it twice. So I'm going to talk to my preceptor about what practices I need to engage in before I'm placed in that situation where I have to engage in that practice independently, right? So that's the goal, is that step by step we're engaging with our students in the learning process so it is sustained over time. All right, excellent. So, beginning with the end in mind is all about our ability to engage with our learners in a way that is going to support their success. All right, so last but not least, let's go back to our thought provoking question. If you chose C, storytelling will be removed since it is a passive learning experience with low impact. You are correct. Give yourselves a round of applause. That is correct. And the reason why that one is correct is because storytelling is an active learning experience with high impact, right? And remember, the question was which statement would be most concerning about the plan? These other two options are not concerning, right? These are great changes or these are great strategies to maintain and to keep in our curriculum, having those group projects and integrating a flipped classroom model, right? Those are great strategies to use. All right, so what we would ask you to do is think about, as you reflect on our content from today, what you want to think about is where are your gaps, right? We've talked about these four key steps to develop over time, these four key habits to help you be successful. So where are your gaps? And then more importantly, what are the resources you need to ensure that you're closing your gaps, okay, related to each of these four steps? So perhaps you're creating a checklist, and maybe you have already completed and fully engaged in three of the habits, and maybe there's just one that you want to make sure you go back and take a look at from this recording, perhaps using chapter 14 in Billings and Halstead and chapter 18, focusing on the clinical faculty role. And remember, for the CNE exam, yes, it's an academic nurse educator exam, but we are expected to be competent related to all behaviors across the nursing program. So we're going to wrap up with that information, and we hope this snapshot has been helpful. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Until next time, have a great one, everybody.